Welcome to Spark Faith with me, Dr. Kris Sargent. This show is about renewed health, rooted in truth, and restored by grace. What does finding health look like for you? Do you have a vision for your future self and a way to get there? I'm Dr. Kris, and after 33 years in functional medicine and a lifelong journey through brain health, weight loss, hormones, mindset, and faith, I know that real transformation doesn't come from willpower or white knuckling your way to wellness. It comes from gratitude, honoring your body as the temple that God created. This show is about body stewardship, not shame. It's about rewiring your mindset, your metabolism, and your spirit to find lasting health without the grind. I'll help you cut through the noise, see opportunities instead of obstacles, and finally live the healthy, purposeful life you were created for. Let's spark faith and transformation together. Spark Faith starts now. Woohoo! Hey, everybody. I hope you are having a wonderful week. I am Dr. Kris Sargent, and this is the Spark Faith Show. Thank you for joining me again. And today we are going to talk about health. This is the Fresh Living Collective. I do 5 weeks of a certain subject, and the health episode is sort of the culmination of the previous 4. So today we are talking about the thing that nobody told you about thriving. And this one is going to be kind of personal, not going to lie. I had a whole different episode written and I looked at it and I'm like, no, you know what, y'all, you just need to know a little bit more about my journey and a little bit about where I started and where I am now and the things that I'm learning. And so here's the thing, y'all, your body isn't the only thing that has to adapt to midlife. We have to adapt our mindset and our heart set into a place where we can accept where we are to some extent, but not necessarily be happy with it, and be okay with that too for a little while and move forward, right? Like always moving forward. So, and that moving forward may be baby steps, it may be leaps, who knows what that's going to be. But I want to talk a little bit about my journey. And so, over the last few weeks or so, we've talked a lot about metabolism and stress, fatigue and strength. And the underpinning of all of that is adaptation, because all of our body adapts all the time to the messages that we're giving it. But here's the thing, right? Our mindset also has to shift. And this is not an easy conversation. I know nobody wants to talk about this part because there's so much fear. And y'all, I had so much fear about shifting some things that I had held on to, like solidly held on to as my truth. And I can tell you that over the last few months, I have had to exactly explode every single one of those truths that weren't really true. And so that's what we're going to talk about. And it's not just about the fact that the strategies that we had during our 20s and 30s or whatever aren't working, but our mindset from that also won't work, right? So let that land, because the way that you think about yourself, the way that you think about food, the way that you think about exercise, there are definitely stories in your mind that you may or may not be listening to because they're hard to listen to. And y'all, I didn't want to admit some of them. Okay. So I'm gonna admit them today. A confessional. And I'm hoping that you can kind of connect to some of this. Because here's the thing, I'm not that much different than y'all. I may have a podcast, I got practice, I got all the things, but behind it, there was some fear that was lingering, and it needed to be exploded in order for me to move forward. So yeah, so let's talk about some different mindset things. Let's talk about where I was and where you may be, or where you're working through, right? And then we're going to move into a little bit more about my story and stuff. So for me, and for maybe some of you, it was always, and I've said this before on other podcasts, right? For me, a lot of it was like just push harder. I have to work out to earn calories. I have to do more to earn rest. I didn't like to slow down, because when you slow down, then you start to hear all those voices in your head, right? I would rather just ignore some things about my body, maybe just get through a season. Um, and you know what, y'all, that worked for a while, and it worked for a long time. It worked through, I had my kids when I was 4. It worked, right? It worked for a long time. I mean, through it all, I've done a lot of things, but so it worked for a long time for me. But some of y'all, it may be crashing and burning sooner than later. And so this is what eventually many of y'all may discover. That what worked for a while isn't working anymore. And I can tell you that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in that kind of survival space of, oh, this isn't working. I need to do more. And I can tell you that with some data, just ordering Apple Watch data, and obviously I don't get paid for any of that, but I needed and a glucose monitor, right? Between the three of those things, there was enough data that I couldn't keep ignoring the issues that may or may not come down the pipe 20 years from now, because wherever you're at right now, and whatever habits you have right now will reflect in about 20 years. So just listen up. I decided that I wanted to continue to thrive and not just survive. So, you know, um, I battled my size and my weight for most of my life. I have always stayed active. I haven't had any major injuries. I've had a few little bumps and stuff like that. And I had my kids when I was 40. That was a big one. But I've always stayed active, gone to the gym, cardio dance, bar, weightlifting classes, running. I was a runner. I started running early in my 30s and then quit for about 20 years and picked up running again in my 50s. And then really started lifting a little bit more over the last year. I was blessed that I could have a personal trainer for a little while. After Cooper was born, I've done a lot of the things, right? Maybe all the things, right? But y'all, I am 5'4". I am not that tall. I am very short-waisted. Okay. So basically, my ribs and my hips are on top of each other. There's not a lot of waist in between, right? And I'm curvy. And I weigh 140, mid 140s most days. So I'm curvy. I just am, right? I grew up in the 70s and 80s. I'm 62. And, in those days, it wasn't social media, right? It was magazine covers and straight bodies and tiny frames and underweight models that were collapsing onto the set because they hadn't eaten for 3 days. And there were no curves, and thin was in, y'all. And my body never really fit that, right? I never felt like I fit in. And so for decades, I lived like many of y'all may probably know well, right? 1,200, 1,400 calories, trying harder, eating less, being afraid to eat more, right? Being afraid that if I loosen my grip just a little bit, that everything would fall apart. Okay. So just take that in for a minute and check in with yourself, right? Are those some of the messages that you're telling yourself? And maybe if you're like, well, I don't think I tell myself those things, think and listen and pay attention over the next week or so to the messages that you might tell yourself when you start to eat, or maybe go off plan or whatever, right? Think about the back of the of what's running, right? What's running in your head in the background. So, as a functional medicine practitioner, right? I've done this for my entire career, 35 years-ish almost. I'm kind of an OG, right, in functional medicine. I started a very long time ago. And the funny thing is, I even taught physiology. So I know physiology. I know intellectually I knew what I needed to do. I knew the nervous system piece. I knew the vagus nerve piece. I knew the hormonal piece. I knew the calories piece. I know how all of the fat and the protein and the carbs and how all of that fits in. But all I needed to coach. I couldn't do it on my own. I needed a little bit of accountability. I'm pretty accountable to myself, but I needed a different kind of accountability. And I didn't know, right? I didn't know that all of these things were really true in my mind because intellectually I knew X, Y, and Z was what needed to happen. Yet on the other side, on the emotional side, I was afraid. I was afraid of all the things that we've talked about up to now, right? Maybe of getting too bulky, or maybe of just getting like bulky and not losing weight and not losing fat and just looking even more like, I don't know. So, my thought process has really had to do some pretty big shifts. And y'all, this is not an easy thing, right? Like growing and personal development is something that I have been involved with. Maybe you don't know about me, but since I was 8 years old, my parents started us listening to personal development stuff when we were young. And I really got into that mindset of growth, right? What do I need to do to shift? What do I need to do to change? Here's where do I need to adapt? But this one place about my weight and my body was not one of those places that I was going to touch, right? I knew that 12 to 1400 calories was the most I could do. This was a lie. This was a lie that I was believing. I believed that I had to work out like crazy every single day just to maintain, just to sit where I'm sitting, even in a place that may or may not really be the best place for me. But those were the lies that I was believing. And so here's the thing, I had to trust the process. I had to trust the process. I had to realize that the physiology is true, but not just in my head, right? It had to sink in and be like, okay, in my heart of hearts, I know that this is what physiology will do given the opportunity. And your physiology isn't that much different. It isn't. We're all different, yes, but there are some basic truths about physiology. And one of those truths is we need to eat enough to keep our body going in an appropriate way, or we will end up in that stress zone that we don't even know we're in, even if everything else in our life isn't stressful. So, slowly, after hiring a coach, I looked around for a while. Slowly, we began to increase calories and we increased calories and we increased calories, right? Well, I can already feel it coming back out of the screen like, oh, what? How much weight did you gain? How fat are you now? All of those things went through my brain, right? Like, oh my gosh, this is not going to be okay. This is just going to backfire. My clothes aren't going to fit. I'm kind of a fashionista, y'all. I kind of love my clothes in a way. And, um, I, I really had to tamper those voices because those were all lies. Every single one of them was a lie. And I had to start trusting the process and trusting the physiology that I had known for decades, right? I had to trust it to test it inside my body. So eventually, after, um, let's see, about 8 weeks, I landed around 2,000 calories. Ah, what? I know. Crazy, right? And y'all, that's maintenance. Maintenance, right? And can I tell you, there was so much fear there. And I'd get on the scale every week because I have to check in, right? This is accountability. And you know what? It would go up a couple and it would come right back down. I was like, wow, this is crazy. So I haven't gained a pound. I've actually lost a few. But there was some real fear there. That fear of gaining weight, that fear of being out of control, that fear of that the decades of beliefs were wrong, right? I had to admit to myself that I was believing a bunch of lies. Um, and I really understand it, right? I get it. And at the same time, I knew that at 62, if I wanted to be this and better at 92 and watch my grandkids grow up, right? That I had to shift something because living out of a deficit wouldn't work for that long. I was going to come up short at some place between now and 100 years old or however old I'm allowed to live, right? And so here, I'm going to say this again. I haven't gained a pound, right? Not one. I've lost, if anything. And, the body often responds differently than the stories we've been telling ourselves about it. Okay, so I'm going to say that again. Our bodies often respond differently than the stories we've been telling ourselves about it. Okay. So the goal was never weight. And this is really hard, right? Because I thought that the goal was to lose weight when I jumped on with this coach. My goal was to lose weight and lose fat, right? But that didn't happen immediately. And it hasn't happened yet. What? Yeah, y'all, I am 5 or 6 months into this whole thing, and I am still sitting in maintenance. But you know what? It's not maintenance. You know what it is? It is maintenance, but you know what this is? This is about trusting my coach. And it's trusting my coach that my body needs a little more time to make sure that my body and my physiology is adapted to where we are. Because if I go into a cut, which means cutting down calories, if I go into something like that right now for a very short period of time, it becomes nothing but another yo-yo diet, which I have done for my whole life. And so sitting in this space of just maintaining is hard because we're so used to going into this weight loss phase in the spring or the summer or the fall, or I need to do this before Christmas, or I need to do this before my birthday, or whatever that is, right? So I had to trust my coach, and I had to trust my coach in my workouts because I didn't know what I didn't know. And every week, my dumbbell weights went up, my leg presses went up, my capacity went up, my confidence went up when I walk into the gym. And I realized something that I had no idea, y'all, what my little body was capable of. And you can be the same way. And that's the cool thing. You may not believe that about yourself. You can you can build strength without building a lot of bulk, without changing your weight, right? My weight hasn't changed, but I know that I'm stronger, right? A while ago, so one of the things that pushed me into this was, I was I've been single for 14 years until just a couple weeks ago. And so I've always been very self-sufficient, and like picking up 40 pounds of dog food or bird seed or something like that was couldn't ever be a problem, right? Because I was the only one who could do it. And so I realized that this was getting more difficult. And I'm like, crap, that's not where I want to go with this, right? I need to stay stronger. And so that was what really kicked me into making this kind of decision. I wasn't going to accept that weakness is inevitable, right? Not not about smaller genes. This is about weakness, right? And I wanted a bigger life. Especially now I'm married, right? I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to hike with Richard. I want to be able to serve. I want to play with my grandkids. I want to carry my own luggage if I need to, right? I want to move furniture around. And I want to stay independent, interdependent, right? Now that I have my husband. Um, and so I can tell you though, like 2 days ago, I picked up that 40-pound bag of birdseed and carried it to the back deck without needing a break from the front. And I felt better about that than any number on the scale that I ever read. Right. So just just realize that you have so much more capability and capacity than you know. Right now, maybe you can't even hardly pick up a 2-pound weight, and that's fine. But just starting, and in a couple weeks, you can pick up 5, and that's going to feel heavy. But then in a couple weeks, it doesn't feel as heavy. And you can move forward regardless of where you're starting and regardless of your age. So, anyway, that's a little bit about my story and the fears that I had in my head that really have bubbled up to the surface, and I didn't even realize we're running in the background. Okay. I I really didn't realize that some of that stuff was running in the background. It's just years of conditioning that this is what was the right thing to do, but I was believing a bunch of lies. And so, the goal for me isn't getting smaller right now. The goal is continuing to become more capable. And yes, leaner, but not until my body is ready to do that. Because otherwise, I'm just going to set myself up for another spike of cortisol, for increased nervous system stress. It's going to put my hormones into a tailspin, and my blood sugar is going to go all over the place again. And that is not health. That is not capacity, right? That's not getting me to 90 years old in a very capable way. So, y'all, this is really about stewardship, but it's stewardship around our control, right? We think that stewardship is about control. We think that it's about restricting and shrinking and being more disciplined. But maybe, no, not maybe. How about stewardship looks like building and trusting and growing and trusting and preparing for the future and trusting, right? Along the way, trusting physiology and trusting the process and trusting your body's capabilities for more capacity. So, anyway, the goal is not just to survive the second half of your life and hope you get out okay, right? The goal is, for me at least, to become the kind of woman who can fully lean into that life that God has ready for me. And I want to be able to hit that strong. I don't want to not be able to do things when called upon. And so let's shift and start listening to those little voices in the back of our head and identify some of those lies that you might have been really leaning into. I was surprised with my coach, and really this episode came out of a coaching experience that I had today. That she was like, I still feel like you're leaning into this old mindset, and I that is a place that you need to really look at. And during our coaching session, that was really what came out. And so you're just getting to learn this as I'm learning, and I keep learning. And I hope that you can keep learning through some of this too. Um, so I think that I'm blown away every time I hit the gym and I can do more. And I hope that you can kind of get to that place too. So here's the thing, we've talked a lot about adapting. We all have to adapt our expectations, our beliefs, the lies that we're believing, and our definitions of health, our definitions of success. Because the goal isn't getting back to who we were when we were 25. The goal is becoming who we're capable of being at 65, 75, 85, and beyond. So, you know, I am always here, right? Renewing health, rooted in truth, restored by grace. So I hope this is something that you love. Hit like, hit subscribe, and I will see you next week. Love you guys. Bye bye. You've been listening to Spark Faith with me, Dr. Kris Sargent. This show is about renewed health, rooted in truth, and restored by grace. Tune in every Thursday morning at 9:30 a.m. Pacific on the Transformation Talk Radio for more simple, faith-fueled steps to live the vision God placed in your heart. Are you ready to take the next step? Schedule a discovery call or connect with me at drkrissargent.com. That's DRKRIS Sargent.com. While you're there, download my free ebook, Endless Energy, the 6 non-negotiable keys to endless energy, and sign up for an upcoming masterclass. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share the show, and I'd love to connect with you on social media at Dr. Kris Sargent. Let's keep sparking faith and transformation together. Can't wait to see y'all next time.